Hi, everyone. I'm Shaheen from The Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here with marketing and brand consultant Kerry Anderson. She started her consultancy Indelible Comms late last year, and she's worked with major brands such as Tesco, Huawei, Dixon's Carphone, and BT. Thanks so much for joining us, Kerry.
Thank you very much for having me, Shaheen.
So let's just start out. If you can just tell us a bit about yourself in your own words.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in marketing for more than a decade. I think I really kind of fresh out of university, started in 2009. I started out focusing more on the comms side of things and actually doing a bit of B2B technology. But since then, I've probably focused more on the consumer side. And really my kind of passion lies in brand building and just kind of a long-term strategy and making sure that any marketing hits the bottom line and is seen as a success by the business.
Mm-hmm. So you had been working in-house for different companies and just decided to go out on your own as a consultant this last fall. So what made you make that decision?
Yeah, a bit of both. So I primarily started out in agency and did that for several years. It's incredibly fast-paced, as all people in agency would be able to confirm. And there's so much going on, and I felt like my next step was to go in-house and primarily work in-house. Obviously, this past year has been a challenge, been difficult for a lot of people, and there have been a lot of changes. And it just felt right for me to focus on kind of freelance consultancy again, which is what I had done before going in-house. So I was very familiar with the setup, and I actually really enjoy it because it gives you a lot of freedom to focus on projects that you're passionate about, and it also just kind of gives you that opportunity to a bit of an external outside view on projects and clients and where they're at in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. So by the way, you're based in London, right, in the UK,
Yeah,
and where are
that's
you from as well?
So I'm New Zealand German, so I've grown up in both countries. My mum's German, my dad's Kiwi, and I've kind of got a mixed family. So I am bilingual. So though I think that my German could use with some refreshing every now and again. But yeah, so that's like my background, and then I've lived in Australia as well, and then I've now been in London for more or less the entirety of my career in marketing.
Uh-huh. Okay. So yeah, maybe you could tell us a bit more about your background and also how you ended up in London, how you got in. Well, you mentioned a bit about that you started out in marketing early, right? But what about your like first experiences?
Yeah, so I actually, funny enough, it was in New Zealand when I still lived in New Zealand, and I thought about what's going to be my next step, like where do I go after this point, and of course I had to make a decision on university and things like that, and I was actually incredibly passionate about acting at the time, but it was difficult, of course, as it is today, and I applied for a couple of the big acting schools, and they had advised that I come back a little later once I'm a little bit older, because I was 17 at the time. So it's just that kind of that emotional intelligence and maturity. So I was looking at options, and I was talking to my brother-in-law, and he had lots of experience in the media market. So he was like, you know what, you would be great in marketing and communication. So that's really something that you should look into. And then I looked into more detail, and I was like, gosh, I love this. And yeah, and then I'd always wanted to go to London and go to the UK. So that's really, I made a decision. I was like, I'm off, I'm going. I think my parents weren't quite that pleased about my decision to just move overseas at 18. And yeah, and then I kind of started going into the industry. And I think, when you look at it from the outside, there is a lot about marketing that you don't understand, or you kind of don't see that it's all marketing. And like, the more you get into it, like the more you see the different like layers that there are, and like the different kind of specialisms and like areas, but also the innovation in the industry. And that's really what kind of continues to keep me excited about it. But I've done, pure like UK marketing. I've done Western Europe, and I've also done global. And I think every single one of those markets and areas really provides a a new challenge and a new perspective.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, what would you say is the big difference from working on a more local campaign versus something global?
I think it's really about understanding the market and understanding the consumers and the consumer mindset. So it's like, the maturity of one market over another when it comes to a topic that you are marketing to them. So, for example, if you're talking about new technologies, whether it was like 8K like back in the day, it's like there's certain like early adopters, and then there are ones that are a little bit more like a little slower on the market, and I think you can really see that in markets as well, where it comes to what they're used to and what they're not. So I think that's a key difference. And of course, like different, like the cultural nuances, I think you have to, like, although it's a global world, there are very much like the kind of cultural nuances that you have to be aware of and cater to. It's like there is no global one fits all approach in my book.
Absolutely. So could you tell us a bit more about like what kinds of projects you specialize in, and like what's your typical day like now?
Yeah, so I love, as I said in the beginning, I love brand building. So when it comes to like the long-term view, so I really enjoy doing my customer research and insight side of things, and working out what it is that connects the company and the brand with the consumer. So like trying to find that common ground, and like what is that messaging that has to basically, or that we'll try to get the consumer to think about us. And I think that's a really interesting part, and especially like in the last year, like that's something that's been changing a lot. And then kind of the segmentation of the market, and the working out like where we should be going and where we shouldn't be going, of course. And then the actual kind of positioning and the objectives. So I think that's really, really interesting. And balancing long-term brand building with short-term activations. Like you need to have both, which I think is incredibly important. And that's an area that I love. And then like when it comes to tactics, like making sure that it all ladders back up to the strategy and the objectives that you've set. So you're not just doing some tactics for tactics' sake. It's really grounded in your insights of the market and the consumer.
So could you share like an example of maybe a campaign or a project that you've worked on, either currently in your consultancy or previously, that you're like especially proud of, or that worked really well?
Yeah, it's still like confidential, so I can't reveal the client. But at the moment, I'm very much looking at how tactics and like campaigns that are going out are laddering up to the overall marketing objectives, but also the kind of wider marketing strategy is like what we're looking to achieve, and whether it is actually getting through to the consumer, and where it isn't, what are the changes that we need to make. So either it's like changing the messaging, or changing the channels, and the kind of the overall campaign focus. And that's something that I love, because I'm looking at all the kind of brand tracking and perceptual map information, like looking at the wider landscape and the competitors, and working out like where are the opportunities for my client, and where are areas that perhaps we don't need to focus on as much because it doesn't give us the return on investment.
Okay, so I was curious, like which channels you tend to work with the most, or like the types, because or you're working at like a very high like strategic level, and then are you working with others, I guess, to do the execution on different channels, or how does that work?
A little bit of both. So because I started out at comms, focusing on PR, social media, and like wider things like video content, and like a part SEO, etc. That's still something that I'm very, very comfortable with, and I do on a daily basis. So when it comes to that stream, I very much still kind of take charge and understand what I'm doing, what I'm looking to achieve, and how to do that. So I think it's still a channel. I think PR can be used in so many different ways, but it's also the focus on content, right? Like having your content strategies and your your kind of pillars, and like the wider more holistic approach to it. So getting, looking at search, for example, and getting people to talk to you and get excited by what you're writing about, and them feeling like, okay, this company really knows what they're talking about because of like blog articles they've read, for example. So that's something I really enjoy. When it comes to the specific PPC and things like that, I would mostly get someone to support on that because there are definitely specialists who are very good at optimizing data and content to kind of reach your goals. I love social media. I think it's important to just be wary of which channels you might use for your client. Once again, I think it just depends on where the customer is at that a company wants to reach, because you don't always necessarily need Twitter, you don't always need Instagram, you don't need Facebook. It depends on your target audience. So I'm quite overall I'm very channel agnostic. But then I love Instagram, but on a personal level, I also really like LinkedIn. I think it's grown in my kind of interaction with it over the past year, because I think with people going into COVID, they've just needed that professional community a bit more. And I think that's really kind of come to the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about, well, first of all, how content marketing plays into what you do a bit more, because obviously in the content mix, we focus mostly on the content marketing side of things. You also mentioned social media channels. And do you think there is any difference anymore between content marketing and social media marketing?
No, so I think there are blurring lines for sure. I think almost any content you produce, in a way that's content marketing, it's content led, and you've got your just in the past few weeks there was the Heinz and Weetabix meme that went everywhere. You've had IKEA and Bernie, those kind of things, and actually they've one of those originated from an agency. Another one was actually I believe a designer who came up with the Bernie IKEA idea, and it was like a mock advertisement, and IKEA took that on and they kind of did their own version of it. So I think there's a lot that stems from external sources, but it is content at heart, and so I think it should be used and seen as content. I don't think the consumer looks at it like, oh, this is video content or this is social media content. I think it's generally different content that they engage with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was curious, what do you think people get wrong, or some brands might get wrong when it comes to content marketing?
Consistency. So I think that's a big one. So consistency, people need to hammer down the same messaging over and over and over again. And I think as brand or marketing teams, we can get a bit bored and we want to do the new thing or something someone else is doing. But from a consumer perspective, it doesn't they are not as focused on the brand as you are. So a lot of that will just fly by. They won't necessarily pay attention to the ad that's running on TV or that one social media post that you're incredibly proud of. So I think just being incredibly consistent and be consistent with your brand assets, really kind of hammering your brand codes is incredibly important. I think that's something that a lot of brands get wrong. The other thing is jumping on bandwagons, looking at what other companies are doing and wanting to do the same, even if it's not right for their target audience and the market that they're in. There are, of course, always ways that you can adapt certain things, but I think you just have to always be true to your brand and be true to your target audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And well, do you have any tips on how to do that? How to make that happen?
Yeah, I think when it comes to brand codes and assets, for example, it's just making sure that everyone in the business is really aware. So when any documents go out, any ads or social media content, that you almost have a little bit of a tick list of you need to you only have 3 codes or something, whether it be your logo, your I don't know, your colors, your font, things like that. It's just making sure that you've ticked that off and nothing gets put out into the public without those being present. So I think that's a really kind of nice thing to do. And then just being really focused on your key messages. Like everyone in the business should be able to have the same lines when they're asked about what the business does, what they're looking to achieve, and wider topics around it.
Mm-hmm. Actually, this reminds me of an issue that I think a lot of brands face, is that now, like with social media and so much content being created by like different members of a team, I think it's like increasingly difficult to make sure that everything like adheres to brand guidelines and is like on brand. Do you have any advice on that?
I think it's just making people aware of the effects. Like, it is a bottom line. It's not just like this kind of like marketing coloring in department, like, just a beautiful activity. Like, it is not that. Like, there's science behind it, and it's focusing on things like, it's not just like your codes that should be present in all of your marketing materials, like anything that you put out. But it's also very much about the messaging, and it's providing everyone in the business with that context, because if you continue to get that messaging right and the brand codes right, you will hopefully build brand equity, and then with that also brand salience. So people, when they go into the supermarket, they will think of your brand because it's fresh in their mind, hopefully. So like, that's what you want to achieve. And then obviously if they do that, then it hits the bottom line, and the bottom line is good for everyone in the business. Like, it's salaries, it's the success of the business, it's just everyone. And I think like providing that wider picture and explanation does go a long way.
Mm-hmm. And next, I just wanted to ask you, you've worked in a lot of different industries, and I was just curious, what is like the most diverse industries that you worked in, and what's like the biggest difference in like working with one versus the other, like your approach to marketing and branding?
Yeah, it is interesting. I've worked a lot in consumer technology for sure, but I've also done a lot of lifestyle. And then most recently, I guess, food and dining, which is not an area that I was focused on before. I think it's really the emotional connection that differs. Like, when you talk about things like holidays, for example, or your essential items, as we all know from the past year, they are much more emotional when it comes to like, seeing your family or spending quality time. Although we maybe have spent a little too much quality time with certain members of family, but I think that's much more emotional. Whereas if you're talking about technology in the sense of like your latest mobile phone or like what those things, in essence, they are not emotional. It's then about finding that emotional connectivity. So obviously, like the technology that allows you to call your friends, message with them, like share videos, photos, like that kind of thing. So it's trying to find that emotional connection where possible, which can be really difficult. So like I've even worked in financial services, and like finding an emotional connection when you're talking about like your like money and bank accounts is just a bit dull. So I think it's a real challenge, and it's just that it almost goes back to understanding the consumer and understanding their drives. And if you have that full-on understanding, then it's easier to find the connection. But that, I think lifestyle is lovely because everyone can relate to it. But when it comes to like the more kind of financial products, it's challenging.
I'm curious though, have you come across any like particularly creative way of like evoking emotion in something for a financial product or brand?
I think a little bit. In fact, it's not a brand that I've worked on, but in the UK, there's Lloyd's, and one of the big banks, and they have got that horse that they use in all their ads, and I actually love watching the ads. Like I do like. Ironically, working in marketing, I definitely fast forward through ads, but I stop when I see that come up on the screen, because I just feel like it hits a mark with me. So I think that's something that's worth kind of thinking about, like, that, I don't know, that something that gives you the feels in a way. And in terms of myself, like, it is a bit difficult. I think, like, it's more about the experiences that allows you. So, like, obviously, like, MasterCard has got money can't buy, experiences. So that's really what you focus on, more so than the kind of technical benefits or features of a bank account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. So switching gears a little bit, I wanted to ask you, like, what you think are like the most important skills for marketers today?
There are a few different things. It's being a bigger picture person, like understanding the bigger picture, being assertive and choiceful when it comes to your options, and I think having the ability to think long term and short term. But the most important thing is the ability to listen to consumers and the people around you, because as a marketer, you're not the audience. Like, even if you think you're in the target market, you're not. Like, as soon as you start working for a company, you're no longer part of that group. And I think that's the most important thing for people to understand. So that's why then listening to everyone around you becomes more important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. How do you do that? What's the approach for, like, getting that feedback from your target audience?
So focus groups, for example, are great. Like, looking at, like, all these, like, amazing insights reports. Like, you've got, like, the big guns. Like, you've got your Minter Global Web Index. Like, you've got Euromonitor. Like, there's so many, like, interesting bits. But you can also get a lot of free content that you find either on LinkedIn or, like, general kind of doing a Google search, a little bit of some research. So there's a lot that you can find there, and then it's really taking it to your consumers, whether that's loyal customers that you've had for a long time. Like, it's, you're with your email marketing, you're reaching out to them more or less on a daily basis. So, it's you should be talking to them. So that's one thing. And then, of course, you can have, like, a more like, specific scenario where you have your focus groups as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And then I wanted to ask, just what advice would you give to someone starting out now in marketing?
Be flexible. You have to adapt, but most importantly, learn the kind of, like, crucial points of diagnosis, your strategy, which includes segmenting the market, targeting and positioning. Learn how to do it properly, and then everything else will fall into place.
Okay, go to the basics first.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
the fundamentals, I should say. Yeah,
but actually they get forgotten about a lot in like day to day, because, like, you get the demands of, like, tactics, like, we need to do some PPC, like, ASAP. We've seen a competitor do it, which is all fine. Like, you need to be able to kind of be agile and adjust. But if you don't have a strategy in place, everything else is not going to be as beneficial to the company, because you're wasting money. So if you can be the voice that says, well, actually, according to our strategy, this is what we should be doing, or this is not going to work for us long term, then that's what you should be focusing on. The other thing is really, like, promotions. Oh my god, there's so much discounting going out. It's like, how are you really going to build an emotional connection with your consumer by just focusing on price?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a super fundamental, like, strategic point that needs to be clear. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, so going to some of your recommendations and advice. What's a productivity hack you can share?
So I'm incredibly productive in the morning. So I love to block out my mornings where possible, so I don't get meetings put in, and then use the afternoon for meetings. That's one. The other one is lists. It's not new, it's not innovative, but I love a good list. I use Apple's notes, and I just like, even in the evening when I come up, like when I walk the dog, I like come up with things that I need to do. I just pop them on my list because it means that it's out of my head and I'll remember it the next day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great tip. And then who's a professional role model or a source of inspiration?
Mark Pritchard, P&G's Mark Pritchard, he's definitely someone who I think is incredible. There've been a lot of conversations about digital marketing, for example, and I see, digital marketing as really as marketing overall. It's like everything outside, everything is now digital, so there shouldn't really be a difference between the two. And if you're talking about things like search, for example, it's a tactic. It's not like a strategic piece that you should be focusing on. So I think he's done a lot in that sense. And obviously he's been, I think he's been with P&G for 2, 3, 4 decades. So it's just a wealth of knowledge and incredible marketer, I would say. And then I think overall, you can't miss a beat with talking about Steve Jobs. I think he's one of the people I get most excited about at the beginning of my career. When obviously there were a lot of conversations and announcements from Apple, and he had this incredible ability to get you excited about products, which I said before is like, that's, it's like, it's a mobile phone, like what's the big deal? But he, for some reason, just made it like the most exciting thing that you have to have. And that's just an ability that you don't see too often.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And do you have a favorite software tool or app right now?
Yeah, so a couple of ones actually. Headspace is a big one for me that I use a lot. I think like a lot of marketers or creative people, I get distracted really, really easily. So if I have to work on a big document, I listen to Headspace. Like they've got lots of kind of soundtracks that just get you in the flow. And that's like one of them is like Hans Zimmer. It's I think 80 minutes long. So I just keep it on repeat for however many hours it takes me, but it gets me really focused and blocks out any noise. And then personally, I just love Slack. As well. It has allowed me to, have lots of conversations and kind of like specific channels with people and share documents and be able to find them again in future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotta love Slack, and I'll have to try Headspace for that purpose. Haven't?
It was brilliant, I have to say.
Yeah, very cool. Well, then I just wanted to ask, how do you stay up to date on marketing trends?
Lots of LinkedIn. So I've just been working on my LinkedIn profile, not my profile, my feed, I should say, a lot. So connecting with people who are interested and share interesting content from around the world. So that's something that I would definitely kind of talk about. And then there are certain publications like Marketing Week. I read a lot of Marketing Week, The Drum, and then just I think general social media and what else is going on in the media, but marketing focused. Trade publications and LinkedIn.
I'm curious, how do you work on your feed besides, or just you mean following people who are posting interesting things, or are you also like optimizing what actually shows up on your feed?
Yeah, so I do, like even if I'm connected with people, if they are sharing content that's not of interest to me most of the time, like even though there might be a contact for whatever reason, I will mute their outputs a lot and like focus on people that I do like. And then there are certain people I follow, there's certain companies I follow because I feel like they are contributing to what I see. There are quite a lot of agencies as well, just because agencies obviously work with a lot of different brands. So you see a lot of great content coming out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's a great tip to optimize my LinkedIn feed. Do you have a favorite marketing or business book?
I think Marketing, definitely Long and Short of It by Les Binet and Peter Field. I think they're both incredible. They're both practicing, and it's going back to balancing the two. It's like you can't have short without the long and vice versa. You need both in today's world, and they're really good at bringing that to life. And then you've got like How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp and Jenny Romagnoc. Very interesting, a little bit of a drier read, but still worth it if you're in the industry.
Okay, very cool. I'll have to check those ones out. And then any other like resources for marketers that you recommend, communities, other publications, podcasts, and things like that?
Yeah, so there's another podcast I really love, which is Everyone Hates Marketers. It's yeah, just like some really really great people on it, and you can learn a lot. I also have been taught by Mark Ritson, who's a big personality in the marketing industry, and obviously I'm connected with him, but I also follow his content, which is great to see. And actually, he does a few mini MBA courses and has communities that are exclusive to that. So you do have to take part in the course, but that's something I'm part of, and I learn a lot from constantly.
Okay, so the Mark Ritson mini MBA you'd recommend as like a learning resource.
Yes, for sure. Very, very helpful. And then I'm actually also on Coursera, for example. There are some excellent courses that don't cost a lot of money, where you can just keep learning. So I'm currently doing a course in pricing optimization and economics with the University of Virginia, which is really, really interesting, and got some great notable names.
Super cool. Yeah, we'll definitely put links to all those resources in the blog post that we'll publish along with this episode.
Awesome.
So we're reaching the end of the interview. So I just wanted to ask you if you have any parting advice or final takeaways to share with other marketers in Europe.
Get excited about the industry. There's so much that we're all doing, and I think it's about celebrating each other and celebrating like great creative and great marketing. I think like everyone's seen enough doom and gloom. So when you see great stuff, like share it, because people like to see it.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Kerry, for sharing your insights with us today. So how can people learn more about you if they want to know more?
Definitely come and visit my LinkedIn profile. It's KF Anderson, so it's not difficult to find. And yeah, if you're interested or have got any questions, like feel free to send me a note.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks so much again. And thanks to everybody for listening in. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out veracontent.com/mix and keep tuning into the podcast for more interviews with content experts. See you next time. Bye.